So the topic today is arrears and spousal support tools. But in preparing for this presentation, I realized that a lot of people have questions about retroactive child support and arrears, and sometimes those words are used interchangeably when they are obviously very different. They do have some overlap, but I wanted to talk about that as well. So we're going to start this presentation talking about retroactive support versus arrears. We will talk about retroactive child support, including side-by-side analysis within family law software. Then we are going to jump into the arrears calculator. This is a tool that all users have. So if you're cloud or desktop or basic versus individual or firm, it is a tool that you have. And then we're going to go into some Alimony tools to end the webinar. You must have an individual or firm subscription to use these Alimony tools. So if you are a basic user and you do not see them, that is because they're not available to you unless you upgrade. All right, so let's talk about retroactive child support. So hopefully all of those topics are what you came for. If not, that's what we are going to do. I'm going to work my way through this PowerPoint presentation, and then we're going to go into the software and I will show you these principles. So what is retroactive child support? So retroactive support and support arrears are used interchangeably, but they are obviously different. So retroactive child support is not past due child support. Rather, when we say retroactive support, we mean support that should have been paid to a person, but was not paid to the present date. And so that support has not been adjudicated. You do not have a court order that says that you are supposed to pay this. So we're calling this prejudgment. And so this is a national presentation. And so your states may be a little different. So I'm just going to refer to these terms generally and mention a few specifics here and there. But retroactive support, it depends on your state. So your state will most likely have a retroactive support award for a period determined by statute. So in some states, it might say you can only seek retroactive support for X amount of months. More generally, or more that I see more frequently, is sometimes you can get retroactive support to when the parties no longer resided together in the same household or were no longer residing with the minor children. So you have to check your local rules to see if you can seek retroactive support, how far back you can seek retroactive support. And then as far as the tools and family law software goes, another question is, does your state apply interest on retroactive support? And the answer to that, unfortunately, is maybe. I will try to slow down. I don't know. I'm completely honest. I don't know how to add closed captions to a Zoom presentation. So I apologize. I will slow down with my speech. And so when calculating the retroactive child support amount, the court still uses your state's support guidelines. And so what does that mean is it's just a child support calculation. And so they're going to use both parties' income during that retroactive period, and there could be credit given that period. And so all of the factors that affect child support are also going to affect your retroactive support. So that's what we mean by retroactive support. So with retroactive child support, let's go, while we're on the topic, why don't we go into family law software, and then I will go back into my presentation before we get into arrears. So let me reshare my screen. And so now you should be seeing family law software login for the professional online site. And so if you're a desktop user, again, it looks different, but it's all the same stuff. And so what I'm going to do is I am just going to load a sample file so that if you were following along, you could see similar numbers. Sample file. My sample file is going to load in Florida. So it will look similar to other states, but keep in mind if you see something that is not specific to your state, that is okay. So to find the sample case in the cloud, you would go to settings here, and then you would click sample file. I can try to make the text larger. So this should have made the text a little larger. And so to load the sample file, you go into settings and then you click sample file. And then you click load sample file here. And by default, it's going to load the sample file in your state. My state happens to be Florida, but the calculators look very similar from state to state. It's just the input would be a little different. So if you are calculating retroactive child support, I encourage you to try to stay within your file. And so what I mean by that is, this is my file. I'm calculating everything within my file, and your file will be set to the year 2022. So if I'm calculating child support, by default, I'm going to be in 2022. But most commonly, when you're calculating retroactive child support, you are usually going back in time and usually going back in tax years. And so that's why I wanted to point this out before we began, is that you can change the tax year to a previous year. So right now I'm in 2022. How do I change my tax year? So let's say that right now, in 2022, child support, you can see it at the top, is $1,267 paid by Blake. Now, let's say nothing changed, except I need to go back one tax year. How do I do that? I go into settings, and then I click assumptions, and then the start year. So this is my current tax year. If I need to go back in time, I just type in 2021. And now my entire file has been updated to the 2021 taxes. How can I check this? So when I go back into my child support calculator, which is located under Enter Data and then Support Guideline, now you can see here, my taxes have changed to 2021. I can go back to 2020, 2019, etc. You get the gist. You may or may not see a big difference in child support. It just depends. And then keep in mind, we're obviously going to update your federal and tax tables. Again, with retroactive child support though, maybe in 2021, everything may have been different. They might have had a different employer, different income, different bonus, different person who the children were living primarily with. And so if you find that you are calculating retroactive support and it's just more complicated than that, what you're able to do in family law software is you can duplicate the file. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going into File Manager. And I'm going to show you here, these two files. So you can see that I have the Donner file, and the case began in 2021. So I labeled it 2021. And what I've done is I've duplicated that file. And what I could do is in one file, I have a certain tax year with the income and the time sharing that they were exercising during that time period. And then I also have a file that's now in 2022 with their new job and the different support that should or would be ordered. How do you do this? So over here with these three dots, I click them and I click copy. And so once I click copy, just like a Word document, it will copy the entire file, all of the data will be there, and then I can go make changes to it. And so this is a way that you can calculate support and keep your file and your data intact. So that is one way of doing it. I do encourage you, though, to try not to do this too often, because you don't want to have a lot of files in which you're not 100% sure what's different about them. So make sure that if you have one of those really complicated cases and you feel like you want to keep them separate that way, you can do so. Just remember that you've done it and just try to keep them organized using the name of the file and then using what we offer now, which is the case. And you're able to use the search bar. So then when I want to see all of the files just for that particular case, I can do that as well. So these are new to File Manager, and we hope that you're using them and that they're working for you. All right, so that is how you would calculate retroactive child support in family law software. Also keep in mind that when you print or create a PDF, I'm going to go to reports and I'm going to print the support guideline. We have these random labels that you're going to see in a lot of our forms, these notes or labels. Use them. If you don't see them and you think they'll be helpful in your state, let us know, because here I could type at the top 2021 retro, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that way I know what I've done and what these numbers are related to. And so these are just ways in family law software that you can keep track of that information. Last, so I want to talk about retroactive support, possibly another tool, which is side-by-side child support. So I showed you how to duplicate a family law software file, but rather than duplicate the file, I want you to try this tool, which is called What If for Support. So let's say that you are calculating retroactive child support, and during the retroactive period, so here I can see that what the sample file does is it's calculating child support with mom making $3,500 a year and then mom making $40,000 a year. So in most states, that will probably have an impact on your final child support number. In Florida, it obviously does. And so I can add another scenario, and assuming we're in the same tax year, this could be a way for you to calculate a pretty complicated situation where either the majority time-sharing parent was flipping during the period or the income was changing during the period. All right, perfect. So I don't see any questions related to retroactive child support. So let me go back into my PowerPoint presentation. I have a few more notes that I would like to go over. All right, perfect. So we just went over retroactive child support in family law software. So can you do it? Yes. And we went over some ways that you can organize it. So now I want to talk about arrears. So in family law software, you may or may not have known that we have an arrears calculator. What do we mean by arrears for the purposes of this presentation? So arrears are going to be court-ordered support payments, whether for spousal support, alimony, maintenance, or child support that is owed. And the arrearage is the amount that is unpaid. And so the buzzword here is court-ordered. So you have a support order. It has not been paid. And the majority of states are going to have interest applied to the past due support. So if you go back through the chat, because we're not going to go super specific into state by state, but I wanted to leave you with a resource so that you have a starting point for your state. And so in the chat, and then I'm just going to repost it really quick. The federal government keeps track of this, and then there's also national organizations that also keep track of this. And so both of those links are going to be really good resources to find out, does your state have an interest rate that they apply to retroactive support or arrears? And then the national legislators, they also have a guide that will point you not only to the amount, but it will also point you to your local statutes as well. So if you're watching this presentation and you're wondering, what does my state do? Hopefully that is a good starting point for you. So please check out those links. So what makes arrears complicated? We all can take a calculator and say, the payor of child support was supposed to pay $100 a month for 12 months. You know, we just do simple multiplication. But because of the interest, that's what makes it a little complicated. Not to say that you couldn't do it by hand or using, you know, an Excel worksheet that you put together, but it's a little more complicated. And so generally, whenever a support payment is missed, it's treated like a judgment and the interest applies. So when you're looking for resources in your state about how to handle this, it could be under your family law code, or it could also be in your civil judgment code. So you got to look in two different places that you might not normally look for. States charge the interest set by statute. So some of you are going to see that your states just have a blanket number. Other states, it will change either quarterly or yearly. It just depends. And so we load those into family law software. Why do states charge this? It's meant to be a punishment, and it's also meant to encourage timely payments. And then obviously your clients are entitled to that money if they choose to seek it or knowingly choose to waive it as part of negotiations. So without software, it is a pain, an absolute pain. So now I'm going to go back into family law software, and we're going to start talking specifically about arrears, and then time permitting, we will start talking about a few alimony tools. So let me stop the share. And I will reshare in just a moment. And I do see a question that I will answer in just a moment. So this presentation will be posted on YouTube, and the definitions will be as well. So or the slides. And then there was a question about side-by-side child support. You cannot change the tax year in side-by-side support. It can only be in one tax year. So you can't compare side-by-side one year to another. So actually I'm sharing my screen now, and it happens to be on side-by-side. And so you can see that here. That's one of the things I can't change. So you can change a lot of different things, but unfortunately you can't change from tax year to tax year. I can definitely talk to the development team and see if that's something that we could do. All right, so let's talk about arrears now. So where is the arrears calculator? Step one. Everybody has access to the child support arrears calculator. It doesn't matter which version of family law software you have. It is located under child support, and it'll say calculate support arrears. So no matter what state you're in, you're going to have an enter data. It might look different because we try to mimic your state's forms. So look for your child support calculation tools, and then look for calculate support arrears. So let's start with the basic principles of interest. So someone is saying that, number one, usually your state is going to have an interest rate by statute. That interest rate is also going to be simple or compounded. Most states have simple. So when I click child support arrears and I look here at the very top, This is my first obligation, possibly my only obligation. The last one is going to be your state rates. When I click view rates, Florida is a beast. So I start with Florida because just to let you know that we do update the interest rates quarterly. So you can see here in 2017, each quarter, the interest rate was different. And so obviously, if you are calculating arrears in a state like Florida, this can be very difficult. And so, and you can see it's simple using end of cycle. All of these are finance buzzwords. So when we say simple, it's not compounding. So simple versus compounding. So the question was, do you have to use compounding? No, but if your statute calls for it, are you entitled to it? Yes. So let me go back to the first page. And so if you want to use your state's rates, I can view the rate and I can say that's what I want. Or I can click view rates and I can use a different rate. So I can say use the rate you specify. So if your statute dictates one thing, but the parties are agreeing to another, you can change that rate. So I hope that answers that question. I'm going to get out of Florida because when we create these reports, they're really long because of the quarterly interest. So I'm actually going to change my state. So in family law software, when you go to settings, you can change your state. You can also change the state for just one party, but when I click change state, I could go to any of the states. In my case, I think I'm just going to go to Illinois because it's a little simpler there. But for you Florida people, we got you. It's just for these reports, I want to simplify it a little bit. So now I'm switching to Illinois. So when I go back to my arrears calculator, now number 5 says load the rates for Illinois. So when I click view rates, isn't that nice? It's only 9%. So it's much higher. Some states go as high as 10, 11, 12%. Some states go as low as 1. So again, use those resources in the chat or go into family law software and check out what we have loaded for you. Now, let's go back to calculating support. Most commonly, you're going to use this for 3 things. You're going to use it for child support. You're going to use it possibly for alimony. And then third, there could just be money owed and you just need to use the arrears calculator for that. So I want to start with that. Let's say, near and dear to our hearts, the judge ordered that one of the parties pay your attorney fees. Or the judge ordered that one of the parties is supposed to pay $10,000 in lawyer fees, or they were supposed to pay the other partner $10,000 for paying the house for whatever reason. What I could do is, and I'm just doing this to show you the basics of the tool, they were supposed to pay this in the first month of the year. So they were supposed to pay $10,000 to the party or to you for fees one time, and I put the start date in. I'm going to scroll down because we're going to assume no payments have been made. So these are payment sections. And then I'm going to click update. So what the program is doing is it's saying that the principal, which is the $10,000 that's owed, it's showing you the interest that is owed, and it is showing you the total. That's just the basics. So now let's go look at the report. So when I want to print this for my fact finder or for my exhibit, I click report, and this is the header, and I click PDF in the top right-hand corner, and it shows here is the obligation total, and here is the principal versus the interest. But this is super simple. Why should you trust family law software? Why should your fact finder trust us? Don't worry, we will show you the calculation here. Okay, so this is obligation 1, $10,000 is owed, and then in Illinois, there's a grace period. So yes, if you are using the desktop option, it does look different. I'm using Family Law Software Cloud. So let's click on calculating interest. How did we calculate the interest? So here I can see here. $10,000 was due on this date. The thing that makes calculating arrears tricky, one of them is interest and other ones can be grace periods. So in some states you have a grace period. And so in this case, you can see that there is a grace period here before the interest is applied. And then you can see the interest in this column adding up little by little until you get to the total interest here with the principal, okay? Now, you might be saying, I know how to take $10,000 and times it by 9%, and this isn't jiving. I hear you. That's not the way that the interest calculation is going to work. And if you want the details on that, view detailed calculation of interest due. So all of these are resources for you to let you know how we're calculating and then also to show your fact finder how we're doing it. So each month has a different number of days, and then we have a daily interest rate that we're applying, and then this is that full breakdown. So all of this can be printed and attached. And so the reason I'm going so slowly and with a pretty basic starter is this is really how you should start. So let me go back to the support arrears calculator, and I'm going to scroll back up. Okay. And so what I did was I showed you how I can have a principal balance and how the penalty, we'll call it, of interest is calculated and applied to that outstanding balance due. Now, most commonly though, now we're going to change up the example. Now we're going to talk about a recurring support. So let's say it's child support. Now, let's say that child support is $300. Okay, so the amount paid. The frequency is monthly, is the most common pay period. And I'm going to keep the start date as the beginning of this year. And I'm not going to end the obligation because it's an ongoing child support obligation. Okay, so first I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to click update. So let me scroll back down. Excuse me. I apologize for all the scrolling. So now I can see the principal, which is the 300 times the amount of months. So up to this point, we've got 9 months in. So the 9 times the 300. And then I have the interest and the arrears. And I can go and print all of the reports that I just showed you before. And let me just do it really quick, because it's different. So you can see here the $300, the $300, the $300, and then the interest, the principal balance is increasing, and then the interest charged here, and then the total interest owed. Now, hopefully you have an easy case. They just didn't pay, and that's the end of it. And you're like, great, here we go, judge. But this is not what happens. And obviously, usually the time period is much larger. You could be calculating this for years. And so these reports can get very long. And so that's why, let me go back to support, and I'm at the very top. That's why the dates are important, because you can calculate multiple obligations within different time periods. But for now, we're just focusing on one single obligation. And so what if they made payments? What if they made payments? So, sorry, I was reading one of the questions, and we will get to it. So let's scroll down. We have different ways of entering payments. So there's 3 different ways, correct? Sorry, let me just get it so we have all 3. Regular payments. If during, so let's say you're doing multiple years, and for months, they paid the total amount for that time period, we can give them credit for regular payments made. So I would click this box here, and it explains to me what regular payments are, and I can apply regular payments. If payments were missed during that time period, I can say that a payment was missed. Last are one-time payments. How many times have we had a case where there was an ongoing support obligation and they would just randomly throw the custodial parent money? and call it child support, whether it was the total amount or the partial amount. So these are all ways that you can enter payments. So why don't we enter a payment and see how it affects the balance? So let's say 3 months into the obligation in the year 2022, they made one payment. Keep in mind this, you have to check your local rules for this or based on agreement. How is this payment going to be applied? To the interest first and then the principal, or the principal and then the interest? Or does this pay the most current and then goes to the interest and principal? So these two are the most common here, but keep in mind it will change the interest calculation in the end. All right, done. So let me scroll and click to update the results. And then let me click here for the report. So here's my report. And I can see here they made one payment. And it was only applied to the principal. We haven't gotten to the interest, okay? And then I can go view the calculation and I can go view the reports and then print all of those exhibits as well. Correct. And I'm gonna go back. So here we go. So then here, I can click to add another payment here. And so maybe they made another payment, 2022, and this time they made it for like $700. And they made another payment here, okay? So maybe a few days later, they made another payment. It was tax refund time, and they made another payment. So I can continue to make payments against it, or if they started paying for a long stretch at a time, then that will also update. Oh, this is also nifty. So let's do this month. If you have a case where they made random payments and you're just like pulling out receipts, and you can see here, I don't have these payments in the correct order, but I'm entering the payments, our program will automatically apply them in the correct order. And when I click update results here, it will update the payments here in order of the date that they're being made. And so now I can see how much is owed, and then I go to the report and I can see how much was owed and then how much was paid. There was a question about if they overpaid. So let's say, let me go back. Let's say that this, I'm just going to make a huge payment here. So when I scroll down and I update the results, the numbers become negative. So when I go to my report, I can see here that there's been an overpayment now. So on the main screen, the numbers became negative, which is to alert you that there has been overpayments. And then when I come to this screen, I can see that what the overpayment was, and then we'll request that back. All right. Thank you, Mark, for getting to the questions so diligently. Let's go back. Let me scroll up. All right. So we are talking about arrears. We did a lump obligation, and then we just did a single monthly obligation for 2022. You can do multiple obligations at the same time. So how do you do that? Let's say that in January of 2022, the payor was ordered to pay child support and spousal support, and they have failed to pay both. How do I do that? Easy. So these are my obligations, or at least my first obligation. If I click obligation special situations, I can add obligations. And so what I could do is, in our case, we're going to do child support and alimony. So obligation 1, description, I'm going to call this child support 2022. It was supposed to start in January of 2022. I do not have an end date, and that was the amount that was supposed to be paid. Let's scroll down. If you click this green box, it will add another obligation. So obligation number 2. And so I will call this alimony in the same period. And let's say that they were supposed to pay $1,000 a month. I go to the frequency, I click monthly, and the start date was the beginning of the year. And I don't have an end date because it's a recurring obligation. I'm not going to end it, even though the calculation will obviously end September. All right, so now I can get a report for just my alimony. So if I click here, obligation number 2, so I can see that this is a report only for obligation 2. So you might want to keep them separate. Or if I go back to my main screen and I scroll down, I can look at 1 or 2 or the full report for all of my obligations together. So it just depends on what you're trying to show. And this is going to be the totals of all of the obligations together. Let me just show you the report really quick, so you can see what it looks like. So I'm scrolling up. These are the totals owed. This is obligation 1, which could be child support for last year, this year, however many months, you get to label them. When I scroll down, then in my case, I decided to do simultaneous alimony obligation in the same year. And then I can see the interest that's accruing. And I can still print the calculation sheet, etc. Now, if I need to apply payments to, you can enter an end date. I'm not saying that you don't enter an end date. I'm just saying that if it's an ongoing obligation, you do not need an end date. If there is an end date, so let's say it was temporary alimony or durational alimony, you can have an end date, 100%. That's up to you into the data entry. So yes, you can. And you'll see that the end of the obligation. In my case, I'm leaving it blank, meaning that it's ongoing and my report will obviously end in September, but I can have an end date. And that can be very important to your calculation. Payments. So any payments that you enter, they're going to be assumed to apply to the first obligation. But I have 2 obligations. So here, special situations. You're going to see this hyperlink under each payment section, which is a special situation. If I click special situation, all of my payments are here, and you can see obligation ID is 1111, which happens to be my child support for 2022. So if I wanted to get specific, I could. But if I want the payment specifically to go to alimony, let me just copy this, put that there. Let's say that they paid $999, just so that we can see it, this number a little easier. Now, this payment will only be applied to obligation number 2, which happens to be alimony. So why don't I go back to my report and I will show you where that happens. And scroll down. So if I go to the calculation of alimony, here, that was the payment of $999, and I allocated it to obligation number 2, which was the alimony obligation. All right, so that is family law software arrears in a nutshell. I'm sorry, there's a question. Correct. So remember, when we're talking about arrears, you are using the arrears calculator because you have a judgment or court order ordering someone to pay and they have failed to pay. So this 300 is a number of arrears, an unpaid payment that's been ordered, and we are going to apply the penalty of interest. If you're in a state where you are able to have interest accruing on retroactive child support, support that should have been paid but has not been ordered, you can also use this tool, but know that the heart of this tool, of the arrears tool in family law software, is to say this money is owed and I will be adding the penalty of interest to the owed money that has not been paid. So that is the gist of what we are doing. So yes, you usually want to look for a court order. And so the start date is the date of the order or when the child support was supposed to begin. And so yes, you have to use some of your local knowledge to get these dates right, because they obviously have an effect on the final numbers. So yes. So arrears, think of arrears as that. Some states allow you to calculate retroactive support, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're entitled to interest on retroactive support. Right. So definitely use this calculator. I would start slow, because if you enter a bunch of information and the reports are just growing and growing and growing, and you're looking for these payments, they become harder and harder to find the more you add into the calculation. Okay, so if you have 5 obligations and 90 payments, we're going to do the heavy lifting for you and we're going to make the reports for you, but just keep in mind it's going to be harder to spot errors. So take it easy, enter the information, check out the reports as you go, and then update the results. Make sure that you click update, and then obviously when you click on these results, it refreshes what the arrears is. All right, perfect. So I want to talk about, we were supposed to talk about arrears and also support. So alimony, spousal support, and maintenance. So why don't we chat about that? All right. I'm going to, again, I'm loading a sample file. Load sample file. Okay, perfect. Now, if there's any other questions about arrears, please let us know. We are going to transition into spousal support tools within family law software. So we talked about retroactive support and arrears, and now we're going to talk about spousal support. Many states have a formula for spousal support. If your state has a formula, what you're going to see is you go into support guidelines. So in Florida, it's just support guideline. We don't have a formula in Florida. And so I would click complete. And then if your state has an alimony formula, we will have a folder that says maintenance or support, et cetera. And you'll open that folder and you will see that we've calculated spousal support for you automatically based under your statute. In Florida, we don't have one. So I'm going to scroll down and show you here. So in Florida, our alimony section is yellow. That means there is no calculation. This number is entered by you because that's the number that you think alimony should be or spousal support should be. It affects child support. And so therefore, I have to enter it into the program. If you are in a state that doesn't have a support calculation, or you do have a state calculation, what I find though is that many of the states, even though you have a formula, it's not necessarily set in stone. So how do you calculate spousal support when you don't have a formula or you want to deviate from your formula? In family law software, we have several tools. So let's go to analysis. And again, if your state uses the word maintenance or spousal support, we try to respect that. And so in our state, it's going to be alimony. So let's first go into support impact. So I'm using analysis tools. If you are a basic user, you don't have access to these tools. You can upgrade and then you will have access to them. All other users will have access to these tools. Support impact. This is where the case currently stands. My sample file has Taylor and Blake. I removed alimony, so all I have is child support. This is a good place to find out if support is necessary or if there's a need or an ability to pay. Blake obviously has an ability to pay. He has a surplus of funds every month. Taylor, the other spouse, is cutting it kind of close. Does this person need support? I don't know. Can this person pay support? Probably. So I hear a lot of attorneys, you guys have your own rules about what you think spousal support should be. one of the most common things that I hear is a percentage of available net income. So if you have the theory that the paying person should pay 30% of their available net income for spousal support, how do I find the net income and of which I would take that 30% from? Go to the expanded report, and this will show you where the parties are currently sitting on a side-by-side basis. And so this line is net income. This is gross income minus taxes here. So if I wanted to use one of my rules or one of my local type rules, talk to each other about what you do, I might take 30% of this number and call that spousal support. So I literally just open up my handy dandy calculator and I take my $10,000 and I times it by the 3. And I think that spousal support should be $3,000 based off of this. So this is the number that I would probably use to do that. Now, if you want to use one of our tools in family law software instead, these are all of our support tools here. One of the ones that I encourage you to start with is actually located hidden under more. And so if I click more, we have what we call support, spousal support break even. If I click this, it creates an instant report that says, in this case, Taylor doesn't need spousal support. Taylor is meeting all of her needs with her current income and obviously the child support that we've already entered. So when I scroll down, I can see here again, which is that explanation. If Taylor was living beyond her means, unfortunately, because of the dissolution, what this report would show is that we would get her back into the black. So if she were in the red, we would show how spousal support needed to get her out of debt. So that's going to be a break even. Now, the next tool I wanted to show you, because we're getting short on time. This is called Meet Recipient's Need. I really like this tool. Let me just get rid of this number here. What does this tool do? If you've ever been in one of these cases, you always ask your client, how much do you need? How much do you need or how much do you want? And what we do at Family Law Software is rather than asking how much support they want or need, we ask how much do you spend? What does that mean? You ask your client to sit down and say, how much do you need for the car? How much do you need for a vacation? How much do you need for your hair? How much do you need for clothes, etc.? And you put that number here, $80,000, we'll say. And Family Law Software says, well, if Taylor needs $80,000 to live, she's going to need about $3,000 in spousal support to get her to that target. What do we mean by that? So we have an expanded report here. And so on a side-by-side basis, what we do is we factor in Taylor's current income, her child support, and her alimony. So you can see here she's receiving both of these, and the purpose is to get her to that target budget. So that's what we mean by meet recipient need. We are asking your client, how much do they need to live? We factor in their current income, the proposed spousal support for the budget, the correlating child support if the two are related in your state. And let's scroll down a little further, because I had a question about the percent, because I threw out the number 30% like that was like a thing. It's not a thing. It's just something I hear a lot from attorneys. So these percents, when you do an expanded report, because you have proposed a spousal support number or your state has calculated a spousal support number, we're going to show you these percents here, okay? And so what these percents are, they show how much of the payor's income is going to pay spousal support or spousal support and child support. And so the 30%, I bring that up because it's a common number that I hear. So obviously talk amongst yourselves and other professionals in your area, because everybody kind of has like their own theory. And so if they're willing to talk to you about that, I think it's a really great conversational topic. And so 30%, if Blake pays spousal support in the amount of $3,000 a month, that's 31% of his available net income. And that just worked out by happenstance. Like I didn't set it up that way. It just happens to work out that way. And so one of the things that I call this is also like the will to work. So if your alimony number is too high, and I think, once you're taking, 50% of someone's available net income, that's pretty high because they obviously need to like maintain their own household, et cetera. That's what these percents are showing. I kind of call these reasonableness tests as well. And so we tell you alimony here and then what line to go to reference how we found this percent. So that's what we're talking about. So I apologize if that seems like an actual formula. It isn't. These are just things that I talk to professionals about, and everybody kind of has their own theory. All right, so let me scroll up. Now, let's say that your client says, well, that's my budget, still driving my Mercedes and still going on 10-day vacations to Europe. You could add another column. All of our analysis tools allow you to have side-by-side analysis. And so in this column, I could say, what if we brought it down? The recipient is going to drive a newer Honda. They're going to go on a domestic cruise. And their budget is, this is like the high end of their budget. This is the low end of their budget. And then we will update the spousal support that gets them to reach that target budget. So I really like this tool, especially, I don't know, I really like it for mediators too, because you want to get a deal done and the parties just aren't really coming prepared, and they really need some numbers to get them, to resolve this case. So these are the types of tools that we have within family law software. The last tool that I will point out to you is balance incomes. So balance incomes. We have explanations at the top about what we're doing. And so what balance incomes means is that when the parties are married, in theory, all of the money comes into the family and all of the money is spent by the family. And so what this tool says is that if we continue to look at the family in that way, and each one of them takes, in this case, we'll just say 50-50, each one of them takes 50% of that pot, and the portion paid is going to be spousal support, that's what we're talking about here. And so if it were a long-term marriage, maybe 50-50 is fair. I could update it and say 60-40 or whatever percents that you decide. So this is just another way, and this is a live number. So I just type in the 50, and then I can add another column side by side, and then we can look at how that impacts the cash flow. All of these reports, you can do side-by-side analysis. All of these reports are going to have an expanded report. So these are great exhibits for your fact finder. And all I do is click PDF in the top right-hand corner. And so that is going to just be a great exhibit. Correct. So child support, correct. It's already being factored in. So my child support number is here. And this child support is obviously coming from our child support calculation. And so let me scroll down. You do have options. So every time, if your state, your child, well, pretty much every state, your child support and your alimony are related. Let's say for whatever reason, you want to break that relationship because the child is going to reach the age of majority and it's no longer a factor. If you look under options, you can unsync alimony and spousal support. So all of these tools, on the one end, they are beautifully simplistic. And then on the other end, they can be really complex to help get you to where you or your clients need to be so that you can show your fact finder why you want this, why this is a good idea, why this should be the resolution. And so that was one of the options that I could change. And this I can change pretty much in any of these tools. Great. Let me scroll back up. All right, that is the end of the presentation.